I'm Effie Barker. We are right here in downtown Los Angeles. A student of Cal State University Northridge died while on a hike. Good evening. Welcome to the special edition of Ugnayan. I'm Effie Barker. In this visit, he's got a lot on his plate. Discuss the Israeli-Palestinian peace process.
I think this is one of the best that I think I would say my favorite. Kasi you have 3 cameras and all the things that you said, like, you would only say that because you did your research.
Do you think that he is using these vulnerability of the television networks and the online publication Rappler? Do you think Duterte is using this vulnerability to take his case?
I think that's very possible. But the bottom line is, it looks to me as an outsider, just with no inside information, just reading the documentation, it looks to me like in both cases, those media entities really left themselves open by violating some pretty important laws, which made it very easy for Duterte or anybody else to press that. ABS CBN had all kinds of issues. And it's very possible that Duterte said to somebody, hey, you know what, let's go after ABS CBN because, they broke the law, or they're not operating according to their charter. That's possible. But really, even if that happened, you have to ask, really, ultimately, I think the responsibility is more ABS CBN. If that's the truth, then, what Duterte is doing is upholding the law, right, which isn't a bad thing.
I think from outside, not so much an outsider, but I grew up in the Philippines and lived in America, but I feel that these businesses, these networks, television networks or print publications are so powerful that I don't think it's like you mentioned, I don't think that Donald Trump has the power or capability to.
Yeah, I don't think that would happen. You're right. I think
they're powerful.
Trump has much less power in that regard than Duterte does.
Right.
America has a much longer tradition of democracy, and so everything is much more. The institutions, such as the media and other institutions, are much more entrenched in America. So I don't think there was much fear that Trump could, shut down a newspaper, shut down a network. That's never happened, and it would never happen. Philippines, maybe so. It's a little closer. It's more possible that could happen in the Philippines, and some people argue that it did happen, and I can't say for certain that Duterte did not have some influence on the Wrestler case and also on the ABS CBN. The case for the media that was suppressed would be far stronger if they had a good record and they hadn't broken the law. Yeah. It's hard to argue their case, when they're really guilty of what they're guilty of.
I have to go on to the other article that you have written, which is about old friends.
Yes.
Which you talked about the country being divided, and that one universe and the other is in the other universe. And you mentioned about your friend that says that he missed all the good olden days when Republicans didn't think the Democrats are communist, and when the time the Democrats didn't think that Republicans are fascist. How do I pronounce this word? Fascists.
Fascist, yeah.
Yeah, to take it into similarity in the Philippines, because I feel that there's also, I can talk about it as well, but did you feel like that as well in the Philippines?
Well,
that it was divided?
To some extent, but not as much as in the U.S. In the Philippines, there's more of a tradition. Politics is something that it seems like maybe it's the culture. There's kind of a feeling in the Philippines that of being polite and friendly, and and politics is kind of like underground almost, or you don't talk about politics. I have a lot of friends in the Philippines who I'm sure don't like Duterte, and they may feel that I do, or that my family does. And again, I'm not publicly supporting him, but they just don't talk about it. It doesn't come up really. And so I think that's a lot less true in the Philippines. But that said, I mean, there are, like everywhere. Now, I live in Mindanao, so in Mindanao, almost everybody is for Duterte. It's hard to find somebody who doesn't like Duterte. My wife's family likes Duterte. Everybody does, So we don't really argue about it that much because everyone's kind of on the same page. I imagine if I were in Manila, it might be a little different,
Right.
but it's much more evident to me in the US. It's like there's two, and maybe this is the way the Philippines is going. I hope not. I really hope not. But in the US, it's like there's two cultures, man. There's the conservatives and there's the liberals.
I think it's because there's just two parties, the Republicans. I mean, there's others, but like Republicans and Democrats in the Philippines, it's not like just two.
Yeah, that's true. It's less defined. In fact, I mean, in the Philippines, I believe Duterte's vice president was from a different party, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is different.
Yeah, that's different. Now that wouldn't happen in the US. There's more of I think it used back many years ago. I think that was the case here as well, but that's been gone for a long time. So it tends to be less divisive, and also in the Philippines there are term limits. Duterte can be president for 6 years, and that's it. Now, of course, he won't be president again, but of course he has a daughter, and that's happened in both countries to some extent, probably more in the Philippines than in the US, where there's sort of family dynasties. And I guess what's going to be interesting in the election in a couple of years is to see if this is the beginning of another family dynasty.
Right. I don't know if Ivanka would run as senator.
I don't know, man. That's an interesting question, because Trump has some sons who, Trump Jr., who's very media savvy and politically political savvy. So I don't know. I mean, we may see the same thing happening in the U.S.
Although I would tell you that from me being a Filipino American, I know a lot of friendships also has been tarnished because of
Is that right?
Yes, and even in social media, sometimes I would just refrain making some statements because I know it will offend, and some people that are really hot with politics. I would see their comments and which I don't like, but I would try to refrain from reading because they are friends.
Well, I feel the same way, both with Americans and with Filipinos. And I also want to make clear, in the case of Trump and Duterte, well, like I said, in the Philippines, I don't really have a position. In the U.S., it's not Trump that I supported or support now. I think Trump is a flawed person, and he's made mistakes. And I think that especially after what happened in the Capitol and everything, I think Trump will fade from the scene. But what I do support was Trump's program, Trump's ideas, Trump's policies. And I think it's important to differentiate between that. And the problem in the US, and maybe to some extent in the Philippines as well, is that Trump and Duterte have such strong personalities that sometimes it's hard to differentiate between their policies and their personalities, and both have personalities that to many people are very abrasive, off-putting, and in order to support their policies, you almost have to just ignore their personalities. That's certainly what I've done with Trump. And if you can't do that, then that's very divisive, because then, you think, oh God, you support Trump. That means, you're an idiot. You support somebody who says terrible things. Same with Duterte. And I've always tried to really make clear that what I support are the ideas, the program, and not even all of the program, but the essence of the program,
Right.
Not the personality. I'm not loyal to Trump at all, but
Right.
I do.
There's a difference between a person who understands and support the programs as opposed to just support because it's Trump. Like
Exactly. And there is in Trump's case, and probably in Duterte's as well, there is a cult personality. There are people who just support Trump because he's Trump, he's God. They love him. Same with Duterte, and those are the people who attacked the Capitol in Washington D.C. on January 6th, and those are the people who one should worry about now on the left in the U.S. There's a tendency to say that all Trump supporters are like that. That group of people represent Trump supporters. That is very scary and dangerous to me, and that's what is off-putting to me when somebody says, "Oh, you voted for Trump, therefore, you're like a QAnon. You believe in QAnon, or you're like the guy wearing the moose head who stormed the Capitol." I'm not like that at all. I don't even know what QAnon is. Never even heard of it until recently, and I think there's there's a cult. There's a personality cult, I think, in both countries around Trump and about Duterte. And I think that's a little dangerous, because those people, obviously on both sides, do not support well, they do support the program, but that's not why they're in it. They're in it because whatever Trump says is, or whatever Duterte says is law, and that's a little scary.